Let's go!
Many people have been using Nintendo Switch Online since it launched in September 2018. In addition to the current membership, we'll be adding a new membership plan. As a part of this new plan's content, you'll be able to play a collection of Nintendo 64
I'm a savage! Oh! I'm a savage!
Nintendo
What am I
64
going to
system
get?
launched 25 years
Whatever I
ago.
want, I have to get!
I think this system gave many players their first 3D gaming experiences, as
Yes!
well as intense 4-player multiplayer action.
What's next?
With
Ladies and gentlemen, the day has finally arrived, and I am so ecstatic. Nintendo 64 Online is real, and it's here, and it will be coming by the end of next month. This has been a very long road up to this point. Even back in March when I initially made that video, I thought it was a reach in some sorts, but it turns out the logic did come to fruition. And now, not only do we have Nintendo 64 Online coming, but SEGA Genesis is coming to Nintendo Switch Online out of nowhere as well. And although there is a lot to talk about in that direct that aired last night, I'm going to focus on the Nintendo Switch Online part, mostly because this is a big turning point in what Nintendo will do moving forward for their online system. As not online system service, this is not a scripted video, their online service, but in general, what's next? This is a big shark to jump, because that was the discussion for the years that have led up to last night finally getting that reveal, was that N64, it's more complex hardware, the games will take up more space to stream, this and that. The price point will be too high once it reaches 3D graphics. For years, a lot of the discussion surrounded going from Nintendo, going from the NES to the SNES, and a lot of people thought the most logical step, or I guess the easiest way for Nintendo to take it next, would be to do Game Boy games, Game Boy Advance games. But to my absolute pleasure, that was not the case. So we're getting a handful, like I predicted. We're only getting a very slim pickings for the N64 library to begin with, and for the SEGA Genesis library, there's a lot of great things I've seen on there. I'm just riffing off the top of my head. I know Sonic 2 is there, not Sonic 1, of course not Sonic 3. I'm pretty sure I saw Streets of Rage. I have to look back, but the main thing I want to discuss as the initial reaction off the morning after this direct is that, man, where does Nintendo Switch Online go from here? I think the next logical step would be GameCube Online, but the thing about that is it took 2 years just to get to this point where we're getting N64 games next month, and you can attribute that to the pandemic, and that would be completely logical, but also I think they're going to want to drag it out more. Leading up to the anticipation of the direct last night, I was watching a couple videos, and I was actually watching Austin John Plays, his video that he made on the predictions or the rumors that he had going into the direct. And one of the things he had mentioned was that how Nintendo failed with the NES and SNES Mini, and how this streaming service is able to generate just an exponential amount of money for Nintendo without them having to risk any real, the production cost, the manufacturing cost that came with shipping out all of those mini consoles. And like you said, with the chip shortage, it makes even less sense. So if all Nintendo has to do is keep adding, consoles to make them accessible through Nintendo Switch Online, you know, as we progress, we get more systems. That's grabbing more people who will be willing to spend the money just to play their favorite games. Because I'm a big SNES guy. I didn't pay for Nintendo Switch Online until they put the SNES on there. I mean, I pretty sure I'd had it prior, but I wasn't making use of that NES library at all. And I'm sure a lot of people had that same feeling when they saw SNES Online. Maybe they weren't big on that, and they were holding off until they got to play Ocarina of Time or Mario Kart 64 or the original Pokemon Snap on Switch. So now that time has finally come, I'm sure there's a subgroup out there who will still hold off until they can get like Metroid Prime or Mario Sunshine, and it's just going to keep snowballing. And you know, if I'm Nintendo, I just see more and more dollars as we continue into the Switch's lifespan, and they expand more on that service model. So really, this is a big deal, because it was really teetering on the balance of whether Nintendo was willing to jump the shark, go all in, get N64, and do a price hike that will probably, you know, be the point of no return for a lot of people who were only willing to pay for the service because it was cheaper than PS Plus or Xbox Live. I mean, Xbox Gold. But now, and there's still so much wrong with the service in general, and I made a whole video on that, and there's no like outlook for that right now. But the silver lining, and what Nintendo is going to basically manipulate and take advantage of the consumers of, is, you know, we have this online service. It's really not worth any money, let's be honest. But you know, Nintendo, their crutch is their backlog of games, their legacy content. That's basically their bread and butter. So all in all, you can be so dissatisfied with the service. At the end of the day, they're going to be like, hey, you want to play your favorite games from 25, 30 years ago on the Switch, on the go, with the Switch Pro controller, all of that good stuff. And you can't do that unless you pay up. And I can only see it getting worse from this point. And I know that that's a different tone than how much I was excited for Nintendo 64 Online back in March. But really, a lot of that came from me just having this grandiose concept of how the rollout would go. And the big tip-off was how Mario All-Stars, 3D All-Stars, was cut from the eShop entirely. And I was like, it makes zero sense for Nintendo to do that unless Mario 64 would be coming some point this year on their online service, because it would be redundant for the people to pay money for the game where they could just pay service. Now, I don't put that past Nintendo. They would do stuff to make people double dip, manipulate them. That's more consumer manipulation. But all of that long-windedness and ranting to say, where Nintendo goes from here depends on the consumers, like anything else. So if they have this, insane increase in generated revenue from Nintendo Switch Online subscriptions, then, you know, get ready to see Game Boy Advanced or Game Boy GBA combined. I mean, with them adding the Genesis, it opens it up even further. That completely took me off guard, because that just cracks open what consoles they'll be making people pay more and more each time for. If they have Genesis, it makes me think of the Virtual Console, where they had, you know, TurboGrafx 16 and Neo Geo games and stuff like that. So I think they'll add those consoles along the way to stretch out how much more content they could add yearly. And eventually, let's be real, it's going to reach a point where we're going to be paying as much for Nintendo Switch Online as we do for its competitors. And when we get to that point, then another conversation is going to be had. But until then, we made it. It's here. It's finally here. I'm so ecstatic. I'm so ecstatic. And hopefully they don't, you know, take too long to add games. The big thing was Banjo-Kazooie. I talked about that. It's fantastic that that's going to be available at launch. The original Pokemon Snap is going to be there, you know, which is cool. But I really had, you know, vouched for that game to be there in the beginning. If it was going to be announced back in March before new Pokemon Snap came out, but that's a different tangent. I say all of this to say we are here. Nintendo 64 Online is here, and that Direct was awesome. I mean, a 3D Kirby, Bayonetta 3, more Splatoon 3. Not really news, but just it's good to see more of that game. And yeah, I was gonna make this scripted, but I really just wanted to have a like initial reaction, you know, first thoughts that come to my head, because this is something I've talked about on the channel for a long time. And that video that I made back in March was the most successful, so I had a lot of pressure on me to act like I knew what I was talking about, and man, it feels good. Not on any conceited or like big-headed energy, but just like, man, it feels good to be right. But anyway, we will talk more about Nintendo Switch Online, because we're just getting started, and hopefully you stick around. Peace. I'm not doing the outro today. This is just a ramble.
They called me a madman. And what I predicted came to pass.